We start with President Obama saying he deserves a second term. Well, he's voted. Bob Strum's a Democratic strategist, and David Corn is the Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones Magazine and an MSNBC political analyst. Bob Strum, that new poll out there is pretty impressive. It's got the president at 50% approval. 46% disapproval. How do you, as a skilled reader of such numbers, view that number? 50 for the president, back up to basically a high point for him in recent months, back up to where he was roughly when he had when he captured and actually killed bin Laden, and pretty much high for him. What do you think? 50%. What's that tell you?
Well, what counts here is the direction, and the direction is moving up for him. I think, his toughest opponent up to now has been the economy. That's turning, and if it continues to turn, he's going to be in much stronger shape. He's also got exactly the right tone in talking about it. He's optimistic but not triumphal. He's not making the mistake that George W. Bush made in 1992 when the recession, he said, was over. Technically it was, but he sounded complacent. And like Ronald Reagan in 1984, he's drawing a dividing line. It's a different dividing line. He's saying, I stand for fairness. I'm going to fight for prosperity, for the middle class, for ordinary Americans. That's my cause. And quite frankly, that's a great push-off against Mitt Romney.
What do you make of 50%?
Listen, Bob is right.
Half the country now says they approve of the guy.
It's with unemployment still high, even though it's ticked down. Unemployment's still high. You have a lot of people who've given up looking for work. 50% is really pretty good given the status of the economy. We've been talking about this since his job speech in September. The White House came up with an idea, came up with a campaign on what they could do to convince Americans that the president cared about the number one issue, that is jobs, that he was willing to fight for it, and they would take it to the Republicans. He's done all those three, and over that time period, his numbers have crept up pretty slowly and gradually, but in the right direction, while, as you said about Mitt Romney, his numbers have calmed down because ultimately he's being compared not just against the economy, but also against the Republicans.
I agree. I think what's changed to the president, these numbers reflect the reality of Bob Strum. It's not that the numbers have changed, it's why the numbers have changed. And it's not just why the job situation has gotten better and how that's affected the president. This president has changed gears since September, and it was a great piece about Gene Sperling in the paper this weekend, that he's focused on jobs, not trying to compete with the Republicans on debt reduction, where he never gets anywhere anyway, but focus on something they don't want to talk about, jobs. And as he began to talk about jobs, serendipitously, magically it seems, the job numbers gotten better. Is it the fact of all three? His improved morale, the reality's getting better, and also he's focused on the right topic, which is jobs for a Democrat, not competing with the Republicans on who's the most fiscally responsible.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's no question that saying jobs, 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 saying it over and over again has helped him, but it's helped him because the job situation is actually getting better. He's also created a narrative here, and the narrative is that he's the guy who's trying to stand up for people who are out of work. He's the guy who's trying to stand up for hardworking Americans. And when he got these recovery numbers the other day, he did a very smart thing. He went out, he struck that kind of optimistic but tempered tone. We've done a lot. We have a lot more to do. And then he said, don't let Congress muck it up. So he's got a narrative that's very powerful at the same time that Mitt Romney is running out of a narrative. I mean, if you listen to Romney's victory speech in Nevada the other night, he sounded deeply pessimistic. Pessimism doesn't usually work, as you both know, in American politics.
Especially when you're running up against the numbers. Let's take a look at the president's approval number here. It's reflected in the matchup numbers, the latest head-to-head with Romney, and also, just to be fair, with Newton. Now, here it is with Romney. ABC Washington Post poll, 51-45, 6-point spread for the president. Pretty strong. Newt Gingrich, much stronger, 9-point spread. Actually, 11-point spread there. David Corn. Let's talk about the guy who's the front runner now, 6 points.
Well, Barack Obama is making gains amongst blue-collar, non-college educated workers, which were one of his weakest demographics. And so
that's common sense.
But Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, if you look at the recent polls, he is creeping up again, as Bob says, going in the right direction. That's where a lot of this pickup is, and I think it's directly attributed in part to how Mitt Romney is coming across as Donald Trump's sidekick. I mean, that's what he's been this past week.
That's the price he paid for standing next to him.
While he's talking about jobs, Mitt Romney is saying he doesn't care about the poor, and he's hanging out with Trump. I think the contrast is getting very stark.
Yeah, I don't think that helped him at all. In an interview, by the way, with Matt Lauer last night before the Super Bowl, President Obama made this case for re-election while addressing the budget concern of many voters. The biggest concern of many voters, the economy.
I deserve a second term, but we're not done. Look, when you and I sat down, we were losing 750,000 jobs a month. In fact, we had found out just a few days before we sat down that we had lost that month 750,000 jobs. Now we're creating 250,000. We've made progress, and the key right now is just make sure that we don't start turning in a new direction that could throw that progress off.
You know, I'm looking at these polling numbers, and they are positive for the President Trump, and I want you to get deeper on this than people that just look at the paper today. It looks to me like the president is hedging the bet here. He reads the numbers from Goldman. He reads the numbers from CBO. And they basically say unless Congress gets its act together and basically keeps the cut going in the payroll tax, makes some adjustment downward, or actually keeps the Bush tax cuts for the middle class there alive, don't cancel those. In other words, plays ball with him a little bit, that they could screw it up themselves. He used the phrase that Congress can muck things up. It seems to me he's got to have a plan B. Sure, if the unemployment rate keeps going down below 8.3, goes down to 8, goes below, he's going to get reelected. If it goes the other direction, doesn't he need to have a hedge?
Well, he has a plan B, and his plan B is to say, don't muck it up, to put the Republicans in a very difficult position. If they're seen to be blocking the payroll tax cut renewal, if they're seen to be blocking the renewal of unemployment compensation, if they're seen to be rooting for recession and downturn, which, by the way, is almost how Romney sounded the other night, they're going to pay a price. And I think Republican
How did he do that? Do you think he was rooting for the economy to go down? Did you hear that?
No, look, the first good jobs numbers come in a long time. I mean, spectacularly good jobs numbers that had very few things in them that you could quarrel with, and he suddenly starts talking about the underemployed. Obviously, we have a problem of underemployed people. He himself, when he ran Bain & Company, used to get people out of full-time jobs and into part-time jobs. Yeah. So he knows about that.
You never miss a chance, do you, Bobby? You never miss a chance to put the fork in. Here he is, the Washington Post ABC poll. More. I love this question. It provided this interesting nugget in how damaging the Republican race has been so far. 52% said the more they hear and have heard about Mitt Romney, the less they like him. 60% said the same thing about his traveling partner, Gingrich. David.
You know,
they don't like this debate that's been going on.
Politics is Einsteinian. It's relative. And if Barack Obama was running against a Republican with no name and no positions, he probably would lose, given the economy. But these guys, Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich, the more people see of them, and the more this is what we've seen from the beginning of this campaign. Perry, Michelle Bachmann,
what has happened in this campaign that has made people think, okay, what's happened in this campaign? We watch it every night. We cover all the caucuses and primaries here. Relentlessly. What have you seen that the average middle-of-the-road voter who's open to this election has not liked about Romney?
I think he has not been able to talk about his own money, his own taxes. You watch those speeches. The speeches he gave in Florida after winning that big victory was as vapid as it gets. He didn't mention one idea, one policy about moving the country forward. So I think people are seeing perhaps a bit of an empty suit, a rich guy who's out of touch, like the cliche goes. He's done nothing to beat back that obvious image. And that's kind of what's been stunning, and Newt just looks mean.
Okay, we've got a couple things here to clash right now. I'm going to talk about this at the end of the show because I see problems down the road that have nothing to do with Romney. They have to do with the economy. Bob Shrum, the president only gets 44% approval on the economy, handling the economy. Only 43% on jobs. It seems to me those remain his vulnerabilities if you're running against them.
Sure, they remain his vulnerabilities, but they're coming up. Those numbers are coming up, too. And the real problem that Romney has is he comes across as cold and callous and indifferent. He's a gaffe machine. At least once a week, he provides a new incident that makes him the guy who's not going to fight for ordinary people on the economy, who's not going to fight for jobs. So I think when you look at this whole picture, it's emerging in a very good shape for the president, in a way that a lot of us wouldn't have predicted necessarily. First, the economy may get better. It may very well be getting better, and we're not going to change horses in the middle of a recovery. And secondly, in terms of the contrast with the Republicans and with Romney, the president, I think, is in a really good place. He's defined a narrative that fits Romney and that you can use to push off against Romney and against the Congress.
I like the fact that he said the longer you're president, you get better at it, which I think is something has to make that case because people want it to get better.
And you know, the payroll tax fight, which is coming up,
it sure is
going to be really important. You saw what happened in December. The president was able to totally isolate John Boehner and the House Republicans from other Republicans, and the Republican Party still has this conflict inside that's going to come out again. Give Obama the chance to look
high ground, though. He's on the high ground because he's talking jobs. And he's talking ways to create jobs, not fighting over the debt issue with the Republicans, where they do have an advantage over. They had a history of fiscal responsibility for years. Jobs are still the Democrats' job number one politically. Thank you, David Corn. Thank you, Bob Shrum.